Well, thank you very much, Matt. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and I want to thank every one of you for coming. I particularly appreciate Mr. Wink Davis bringing my mother, Caroline Howard, who is here this morning with us. And I want to start off by telling you how glad I am to be with Tom Perdue and his son, Bill. Is that right? Isn't it Bill? I guess your name for your granddaddy. Is that right? Tom and I have been acquaintances for a long time, and I have increased my respect for him through the years. He worked for Governor George Busby during the time that I was in the Senate. He worked for Joe Frank Harris during the time that I was in the Senate. And I think that one of the highlights of the campaign for me when I was running was something that you remember these things when you go through a statewide campaign, and anyone who's ever done it will tell you that. These things are just kind of burned into your memory. And one day I was in a county where I was not supposed to do very well in this particular area. And I walked into a filling station. I think it was in Wadley, Georgia, as I recall. And I stuck my hand out to shake hands with a man there who ran the filling station. I said, "I'm Pierre Howard. I'm from DeKalb County. I'm running for lieutenant governor." He said, "I know about you." He said, "My nephew, Tom Perdue, says you're the man to vote for." So I never have forgotten that. And I appreciate it. I'm delighted that Tom is associated now with the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. I want to speak to you just briefly about the value of an organization like this. Tom can tell you this because of his practical understanding of the processes of government. And I can tell you from my experience, 2 years as lieutenant governor, that one of the dangers of being in office is that you become consumed by your schedule. And many times there is not enough time for reflection about issues and philosophy and that sort of thing. And to have an organization such as this one, which is well-staffed, well-funded, and which has as its central theme not a partisan approach to government, but a philosophical approach, is a very valuable service to all of us who serve in public office. And I have always believed that a ferment of ideas and exchange of views is central to improving our democracy. We're never going to reach perfection in this process, but I think that the existence of this foundation bodes very well for the future of Georgia, because as all of you know, and as you have seen from the recent elections, Georgia politics is changing, and the face of our state is changing, and the needs of our state are changing. And so there is more now than ever a need for this organization. So thank you for the work that you're doing, Matt, and to all of those who work with you. I'm looking forward to working with you during the next 2 years to see if we can get some things done. Matt said, or maybe it was Tom said, that some of you were a little surprised when I was chosen to kick this thing off. And I can understand that. Being a Democrat in this legislature for almost 20 years now, I was there 18 years as a senator and 2 years now as lieutenant governor, I realize that there is some feeling out in the state that if you've been there that long, that you are more than likely part of the problem instead of part of the solution. What I want to try to convince the people of this state of is that I want to be a part of the solution and not a part of the continuing problem. And I hope that my actions as lieutenant governor will demonstrate that. I want to tell you that the first thing about my political philosophy that you need to know is that I'm convinced that government does not have all the answers to the problems which exist. And I do not believe that government should try to solve all the problems which exist. There was a time in the history of my party, particularly when I think we felt that if government could just get its arms around a problem, that the problem could be solved, that that was the approach that would work. And I think through the years, that approach, in most instances, has proved not to be the most efficacious and the most effective approach. The only approach that will work, in my opinion, to solving all of the various problems that exist in America, and that goes for education problems, environmental problems, social problems, is a partnership between the private sector and the public sector, with government having a newly defined, narrower role, and the private sector taking more responsibility in terms of funding various programs that they believe will work, and working with government to run these programs. I believe that for our part, those of us who are sojourning in government, and incidentally, I do not plan to stay in government all of my life by any means. That is not my hope. But what I want to do is try to do a good job while I'm in there, and then at some point I plan to get out and maybe join you and work from the private side of it. But I believe that government has got to be more efficient. Now that sounds like a simple-minded thing to say, but I'm not sure that any of us believe that that has been the watchword of government in the last 25, 30 years, or maybe ever. I think our founding fathers had that in mind when they set up our government, but during the times when the economy is good, it is particularly easy not to worry about that, just to build layer upon layer of program and to increase the bureaucracy as the budget expands. But now that we have been visited by this recessionary period, I think that it has forced people like me and hopefully more people in government to take a closer look at our practices, our spending practices, our budget practices, our fiscal policy. I am absolutely convinced that we can save a great deal of money in state government. I believe there is a lot of fat in state government. I recently went around the state on something that Tom has trudged around on, the Pre-Legislative Forum, which is sponsored by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. And I talked a lot about this idea that I've got. It's not been very well received at the state capitol so far, but I think it's a good idea, and I want to talk to you about it. The largest expenditure in state government is our personnel, the people who work for state government. We have, according to the statistics that I believe, about 7% more state employees than the average state in America. We have around, I think it's 57 state employees per 10,000 as opposed to the average state having 47. If we can get the number of state employees down to the national average, and I don't think we should ever aspire just to the national average, but let's take that as a basis for improvement. If we could get the number of state employees down to the national average, then we would save approximately $225 million a year. Now those figures probably can be disputed, but it would be a large number of dollars that we would save. How are you going to do this? You can't just go out and start firing people. I don't think that's what any of us have in mind. But what I wanted to do, what I still want to do, is to have a study, probably done by an outside group, of all the functions in state government. And it would be something that would take some time, and it would be something that would cost some money to do. But I would want, and I would like your input as to whether this will work or not. But what I want to do is categorize every function of state government as either essential or non-essential. And then when you consider that even in bad times we have between a 10 and 15% attrition rate in state government, when the non-essential functions lose people through attrition, you just don't rehire and you abolish the position. And over a period of 3 years, we've estimated through some work that was done for me at Georgia State that we could save all this money. So why not do it? Last year, the Senate, in talking to Governor Miller about his rebound program, said that we are willing to try to go along with your idea of of making state services pay for themselves if indeed we're going to continue along this path of downsizing government. We have to have a continuing commitment to that. And so we put some money into the budget for the purpose of studying this attrition commission that that's the way we have referred to it. And so far, it hasn't gone very far. And I'm going to keep pushing that. I want to see it happen because I'm firmly convinced that it needs to. Another idea that we've had in the Senate, when Don Johnson was chairman of our Appropriations Committee, the Senate insisted on any state employees' pay raises being based upon merit. You know, state government is one of the few places where if you do a great job, you get paid the same thing as if you do a sorry job. And I don't know if any of you would run your businesses that way, but I'll be willing to bet you. I know many of you personally, and I know you wouldn't. I mean, that's just an absurdity. But in state government, on account of a lot of different factors, we do not have any kind of assessment of those under the merit system in particular. You know, you just give them an across-the-board raise. So I think that makes no sense. And if government is going to serve the people in the correct way, we have got to build some incentives into it. So we wanted to do that, and that didn't go forward because it was vetoed. But I am not here to criticize. I'm here to tell you that there are a lot of new ideas that are being thrown out. This thing that Matt was talking about of having a committee like the Un-American Activities Committee used to be in Washington down at the state capitol is something that I find just to be almost laughable. I mean, I can't imagine anything of that kind being adopted by either house of the General Assembly, and I have confidence that it won't be. And I agree with what you're saying. I think that all of us recoil at an idea of that sort. But this is a time when we have the maximum opportunity to make some changes in state government. There is a general feeling in the state of Georgia that we can make changes, or we should make changes. We have 23 new members of the Senate. We now have a Republican caucus of 15 senators. A lot of the Democrats who've just been elected are very much attuned to making some changes. And that's the reason that I've pushed forward this year with my proposal for term limits. Now, that has not been well received in some areas down at the state capitol. I understood that when I put it in. I knew that there would be strong opposition. But if you go out here and ask the first 10 people you meet on the sidewalk today if they're for it, what you'll find is that approximately 8 out of 10 think that term limits are an appropriate sort of solution. You know, we've already got term limits in Georgia because the governor can't run but twice, 2 consecutive terms. I personally feel that we'd be better off with 1 6-year term for the governor and the president, but that's something to talk about another day. The reason that I believe in term limits, you might say to me, well, you know, you've been down there 18 years as a senator. Why would you hypocritically put in a proposal for term limits? Well, let me tell you something. If you're not willing in politics to re-examine the things that have always been thought of as the guiding principles once in a while, then you ought to get out. It's time for you to leave if you're not willing to challenge yourself. And I think that after being there for 20 years, certainly my views today are not the same as they were when I was 29 years old in 1972. My philosophy has changed somewhat and has evolved through the aging process, I guess, and through the fact that now I'm a parent, I have 2 children, and the fact that I'm paying more taxes now than I used to, and the fact that I've been down there and seen some of the things I think need to be changed. I believe that our state legislature was set up originally to bring a lot of different perspectives into the legislature. It was not intended to be a place for career politicians. And I think that over the years, that sort of approach has changed. And I think that having a fresh flow of ideas, and if you get into politics knowing that you have a time certain in which you can get your objectives accomplished, then I believe that it will be salutary for our state government. And another side benefit to it is you wouldn't have to have a legislative retirement system at all if you had term limits. I've often wondered about the rationale for it anyway, but you see with term limits, then that would be a side benefit. You could get rid of the legislative retirement system down there. And so I think that term limits eventually is going to prevail because the people believe in it. When the people believe in something, eventually the elected officials catch on. That was true of our effort to get some kind of ethics code. When I was elected lieutenant governor, we brought in an ethics code for the Senate. We're one of the few legislative bodies in America that has its own ethics code. And believe me, it's not the easiest thing to write, and it's not the easiest thing to administer. We're having a little bit of birthing pains right now about that. And there are things that we probably need to still add to it. But the effort is going forward, I think, because the people insisted on it. Let me tell you one more thing that I've done. Back in 1982, a very close friend of mine from DeKalb County, Senator Bob Bell, introduced a bill that required a supermajority for tax increases and fee increases. And I voted for it as a senator. I have introduced that again this year to require a supermajority in both houses for any tax increase or fee increase. And I note that many of the states in our union have already gone to that. In fact, in the state of Colorado, you cannot increase taxes out there unless the people vote to do it. I can't see any good reason for not having a supermajority for tax increases. If there is a tax increase proposed which is meritorious, then you're going to be able to get the votes in both houses. In the Senate, you'd have to have 38 votes instead of 29. And it won't be that difficult to do if the people support the idea and if it's a meritorious idea that's really needed. So I hope that you'll help us. I know that you support that. I hope you'll help us get the votes in the House of Representatives to pass it. I think we'll pass that in the Senate. But another thing that I want to talk to you about is the Slush Fund. Now, there are some people at the Capitol that don't believe in calling that the Slush Fund. They think that is insulting terminology. But I would submit to you that the people out there view it that way. When you have undesignated pots of money in the budget, which are doled out by a few people, naturally the public is not going to be too happy when they find out about it. The point is not that the money went for meritorious projects, and as far as I can determine, most of the money went, all of the money went to projects that probably everyone in this room would think was a pretty good idea to help a school build something extra or build a ball field or something. I mean, those are good things. But you can't have a process which puts all the power in the hands of a few people and which is, creates an atmosphere where money is being dispersed and people don't know what the deal is. The fact of the matter is that that money was put into the budget at the last minute without any notice to anybody in the legislature except those who were in control of this fund. We have these things called tracking sheets. You know, the budget looks about like one of the old Sears Roebuck catalogs. It's extremely complicated and is extremely voluminous. And the only way that anyone, including me or the governor, I would submit any of you, if you were down there in the process, can know in any kind of organized way what's in that budget is that the budget experts in the Legislative Budget Office and the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget give us tracking documents that summarize the material. And that slush fund didn't appear in any of the tracking documents. It was never mentioned, but it was stuck into the last version, which was printed at 11:30 on the last night of the session. So the Attorney General and I, working together, have come up with a bill to correct that problem, and it would create a framework of laws that would prevent any such funds of money from being inserted in the budget again. I want you to know that I'm trying as hard as I can to do a good job for you. I know there may be times when we won't agree on things, but I want you to know that I'm open to new ideas. I'm open to the philosophy that you're pushing, and I want to work with you. Matt and I have had some good discussions about privatization, which I'm a big believer in. I note that we have a train down there that we own that's running at a deficit. I'd like to privatize the state cafeterias. I would like to privatize every single function that we can possibly privatize, because it will accomplish my goal of trying to get the number of state employees down. It will help the business sector to be free from competition from its own government. And I think we'll undoubtedly get a better quality of service if we privatize more. Matt and I have had some good discussions about education and trying to give principals and teachers in each school more autonomy and freedom to do what they're trained to do without excessive intervention from the central office. So there are a number of different areas that you have in your tenets and principles that I'm interested in. And in terms of welfare reform, for example, 10 years ago, I and a couple of other senators introduced a bill called the Workfare Bill, which is now the Peach Program, which required able-bodied welfare recipients to work in exchange for their checks and also gave them job training. And Georgia pioneered in that area. And we haven't done all we need to do in welfare reform, but you need to be aware that the Peach Program is out there. And since I was elected, we have doubled the size of the Peach Program, and we are taking these women and getting them their GEDs, and then we're getting them into job training, and they're going out and getting jobs in the private sector. They're not working for government. It's a real success story, and I think it's maybe not enough is known about that program. But there's a lot to be done, and I can assure you that the only way it will be done is through the attention of a vigilant Georgia public. And if you will press, then the results will come. And I know that's what you intend to do. I'll really look forward to working with you in the years ahead to improve the quality of life for all of our people and to make sure that our government serves the role and the function that it ought to serve. Thank you very much.